The following content has been provided by RWTH Aachen University.
Rule number 2, speak the user's language. This means taking words and concepts from the application domain, not from your technology handbook. How do you find out about those words? Well, you talk to the users, right? You do interviews, you do observations with your users. What I mean by that is if you do a drawing application for an architect who in their office they talk about drawings all day long, you don't call it a file, you call it a drawing, right? File is a computer term, but drawing is the term from the application domain. This applies to words for objects, like drawing, but also entire work processes or tasks. For example, if a company, a little shop runs on orders, like a flower shop that gets in orders for flowers and then needs to dispatch them, the order is a concept, although there is maybe not a physical thing that represents it one-to-one, but the order as a process is very important to them, is something they talk about all the time. So that needs to be manifested in your user interface, right? You talk about the things that the application domain, the users actually know and the way they talk about it. This can also go wrong in a way, for example, when you translate interfaces badly. One example that I saw was in a telephone book menu. We did a study for Connect. You may know this is like this mobile technology porn magazine. Connect has always like the new cell phones in there and stuff. And they wanted us to do a study on usability of smartphones. So we looked at a variety of smartphones. This is a couple years ago. And we found this Motorola interface that in German offered these options here. So you got, you're in the telephone book menu, and you can create a new entry. You can change it, or you can, well, in English, if I say share, it's fine. Right? To share a contact makes perfect sense in English. But those of you who speak German might notice that teilen is actually not a natural word for that, because that could also mean like splitting it in half. And that's probably not what you want to do. So this confused a lot of the users back then when it's like, what do you mean I'm supposed to like split this contact in half? That doesn't make sense. So you can see the guy who was working at Motorola probably opened up Leo online and looked up the translation. It's like, oh, share, I guess teilen is good enough. So careful translation into different languages is also important to speak the user's language in each country. So not so great. This is turning into like a Mac fanboy talk, but there is another example here that I've seen in iTunes that actually does a pretty good job of this. And you'll find this in the user interface design guidelines that Apple tells you this is what you need to do. For example, when you look at iTunes, you'll find that in most cases it is talking about things like music, songs, video, movies, playlists. The word files actually comes up very rarely. It only comes up, for example, in the fact that the menu is called the file menu. And that is showing us a nice design conflict that Apple ran into, that everybody runs into, which is, on the one hand, you want to speak the user's language for an application domain like music. On the other hand, there are cross-application design guidelines. In this case, Apple says on the Mac, any application needs to have a file menu as the first thing after this program menu here that has the program name. So it's got to be named file, and there has to be an edit menu and so on. So some of these are just given for inter-application consistency, because the print dialog is always in the file menu down there. So these kinds of things then get into conflict. Another reason, sometimes you will see the word file mentioned in iTunes, but only when they really want you to think about the physical thing on your hard disk, right? Well, physical is maybe overdoing it a bit, but the actual data file. Everything else will talk about these terms that are taken from the application domain. And not just in the menus, but also in dialogues that pop up and the online help. For example, here, it talks about music, video, shows, audiobooks, etc.
This content was provided by RWTH Aachen University.